So, we are designing the quote unquote perfect workshop. And in tonight's session, where we're going to talk about some of the ideas to consider when you are designing a workshop, I want to know a couple of things from you all. So, as promised, I wanted to open up tonight's session with, has anyone hosted a workshop? And this is a little bit different than hosting like a series or a specialty class. So, if you've hosted a workshop, I want you to ask yourself, did you walk into that scenario with an actionable plan? Like, was your student supposed to learn something, take something away with them? Now, I get it. As yoga teachers, I think we are always trying to sprinkle something into our teaching. It's not always just feel good. We want them to walk away with a new tip or trick, right? But when we think about a workshop, this is really designed for them to have an opportunity to maybe take notes, or whether it's literally or just in their mind. We want them to learn something about themselves or their practice, that sort of thing. I saw that, Deb, you put your hand up right away, so I want to come to you first. I am going to have you unmute and share your story, and then I'll ask you some questions.
Yes, ma'am. Hi. Yes, I am. I have been so blessed with this opportunity to be able to share. For me, I never planned to be teaching. Like, it was never in my ever. Like, when I started the 200 hour, it was for me, and I have no words, honestly. Like, it just took me to a place where I never thought that I would be. I never intended on teaching. And as I continued on, Bree, with your, like, honestly, like, I don't even know. It has been such an adventure that I decided that I would go on and I would attempt to teach some yoga. And with that being said, honestly, this has been the most fulfilling adventure of my entire life. Honestly, I've had I don't have a big class or anything, but the women that I do have in my class, honestly, they have come up to me and have expressed. Mm. Honestly, I had a woman come up to me today, like today. Today has been such an amazing. Had the one woman come up and said, when you say at the end of our how grateful you are to have us here, I just want to repeat that back because honestly, I felt like you have saved my life. I was just like, oh my God, this is just like she has experienced her experience for her trauma because I feel like I do trauma informed, and that's how it started out. And she said, honestly, you saved my life. Her granddaughter is 3 years old and has a brain tumor. And so in my practice, in our practice, we do the stones, we set our Sankapa, we have our affirmations, we really just move through like all the things. And she said she had taken all her stones that she had collected over the time and presented to her granddaughter and told her granddaughter, when you're in pain, just pick up a stone and put it where you're hurting. Mm. And honestly, it's like there's no words. Honestly, there's just no words. And I thought, oh my God, there's nothing better than like how can you be on that? Like there's nothing like and then I don't know, another woman come up to me and said that her life has been so enhanced by participating in the program. Bree,
I love
like
that.
honestly.
I love that. I do have a question for you because I know exactly what you're talking about. Would you
Hmm.
consider because I know you're teaching in a very particular way. So, would you consider that you're teaching these sessions workshop style or
Yes.
okay. So, tell us
Yes.
your thoughts on the topics that you're utilizing in a workshop styled environment.
So, thank you. Yes. So I'm working through, we work through the chakras and with all of that, like like there's many blessings that come through that. But honestly, I work through we work through the root. So I sent you that today. Like I just really wanted to, you could send all the sequences to you and yeah, they're in and all the but unless you see it live, like I feel like that's really you have to really kind of feel that and experience it to know what it's like and how these women feel. Like I have up to 7 people coming, but today the weather, the snow, and all that, there was 3 people. But all 3 of those individuals, like there's no better feeling to experience what I experienced today. And it was very, very beautiful. So I'm sorry. What was the question?
Well, I totally get what you're saying and absolutely love what you're doing. I know you're teaching what we're going to talk about a little bit later, which is turning maybe not just one workshop, but making it more of like a workshop style or a workshop series, which is a
Yeah,
little bit different than what we're going to talk about tonight, but absolutely love just hearing you talk about the passion and the feedback because we're going to talk about both of those things in tonight's session as well. And
yeah,
because I know how this journey has started for you and how it's continued on, it's another perfect point that if you go in with this idea of, I really want to teach this one time or this workshop, or I want to try to create something that's maybe going to have a beginning and an end, meaning we're going to have some sort of progress, right? And the way that your intention, your sankalpa, as Deb pointed out, sets it up is how it goes. And it's a little bit different than just being on schedule at, let's say, like a studio. Not that you can't teach in a studio in a workshop style. Many of you know I did that for the last year and a half with foundations. And we're going to talk a little bit about all of these variations of this idea, this concept of what is the quote unquote perfect workshop. Like this may be the one and only time you're going to be able to teach this thing, right? And how to like organize it so that if you get an opportunity, as Deb has, to turn that into a multi-layered series with the workshop style in mind, with the hopes that your students are not only receiving a nice practice, but they're also taking away something very profound. She is hoping to teach them something that they can walk away with. And we're going to talk a lot about that as well. Well, thank you, Deb, and congratulations. And I look forward to seeing what you sent me because I know it's going to be awesome. We have another presenter who's going to come on and talk about her experience teaching workshops. And Miss Marilyn is actually one of our yoga grad school graduates and is currently in a yoga therapy program and has gone on to do some really cool stuff, as those of you who know her knew she would do. So, Miss Marilyn, I know you've taught a few workshops at this point. Could you tell us about your workshop experience and the topics that you taught?
Certainly. Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a wonderful day. You can hear me all right? Great. Um, So I have taught 4 workshops now. One of them, the first one was a meditation workshop at Julia's studio. That was a 1.5 hour workshop on meditation. Then I taught another one. So I'll go into a little more specifics. The other one was a weekend workshop that encompassed meditation, yoga nidra, spa, relaxation, taking care of yourself. Recently now I have been working a little more directly in the yoga for arthritis, segueing into that. Those are going to become sessions, classes that I will be teaching for people with chronic pain. So the way I organized the very first one that I did, which was the meditation, I divided it up into 5, maybe 6 segments. And looking back on it, it was a lot and probably too much information. I know Bree has said before, if you're going to be teaching, you plan to teach a lot, knowing that you probably aren't going to teach it all. So be over prepared and then listen to yourself when it begins to happen that you're thinking, I've got way too much information. If you have too much information for yourself to give out, you definitely have too much information for those people sitting on the other side to listen to. Um, so I had, it was a great experience. The good thing is, whatever you do is absolutely perfect. It's exactly right. Looking back on it for yourself, you will learn from it. But whatever you do is exactly perfect. And don't worry about too much, too little. Just go with your own feelings. The next one then, so the meditation one I love because I really love meditation. The next one was not quite as involved because it was over about a 24-hour time period. The people came for 3 or 4 hours. We did what I had set out. They went home, they did whatever they needed to do. They came back the next day. Not everybody came back the next day. Some came back the next day. We did what I had set out. It all worked out perfectly, but I was a little more relaxed and realized that everything that I have is not going to go in the order in which I planned it. And so again, yoga being the guide, you go with the flow. You feel the feelings, you take in consideration the room in which you are, and allow the feedback from your people to lead you. If they become lethargic, that means you need to kind of step things up a little bit. But it was a great experience as well. I learn as much or more, maybe, than the people that I am leading. Maybe they learn a lot. Maybe it will come back later. I don't know. I don't care. I am giving what I can give. They receive what they are able to receive at that time. And maybe it comes back later. We won't know. We don't know. The arthritis portion, you do learn very quickly how you are helping people through their chronic pain, because you do get immediate results in helping people with chronic pain through breath work, through meditation, not necessarily through yoga asanas, but anybody who is breathing cannot be anticipating what's coming next. If they are right here in this moment, concentrating on their breath work, they are healing themselves right now.
Well, I do have some additional questions to ask, but I want to point out that I loved opening this session with some commentary on your both of your ladies' experiences because as I go through the rest of tonight's session, you both have hit on in lots of different ways the topics that I am going to present more concisely. So if you, as we go through the topics and you're like, oh, that's what Deb said. That's what Marilyn said. You're right. So way to really sum it up. You can sign off now. It's over. Great job. Okay, Marilyn, I have a question. So, in your experience, what would you say would be some of the pluses or positive aspects of teaching in a workshop environment versus just teaching a regularly scheduled class? Why did you like workshops if you had to make the comparison? And then we're going to flip that and say, what are some downsides?
In a workshop, you have a specific topic that you are actually working on. The people that come to the class are interested in that particular topic. So there's already that little back and forth thing. The downside is, well, I don't know if there's a downside. Do you think there's a downside?
Well, if there wasn't one for you, I'm okay with that. Deb, you come on, chime in.
So it's not for everyone. It's just really like some people are just not ready. Does that make sense? I don't know, but I have felt like I've gotten some feedback like, okay, this class took me to a place where I wasn't ready. I'm just not ready to experience that right now.
I
So
love that answer. We're going to talk about what that could look like and why that quote unquote I wasn't ready. Obviously, Deb's environment is more trauma informed or trauma sensitive, so there could be
yes,
some of
and
that.
nothing against what Marilyn is doing because she is amazing, like 100%. Like I have been a participant of Marilyn's class, and she does some amazing classes. So it's nothing like, please don't take it the wrong way. I'm just saying that this is some feedback that I have received, and so I just wanted to share that.
No, that's great, Deb, because the feedback that you received, we're actually going to talk about why some students are quote unquote not ready. And there's some ideas around why they might not be ready for a workshop environment. I love the idea that Marilyn answered from the guide's perspective, the facilitators, and Deb answered on behalf of the student. And that's really important to be able to play that game that both of you have been comfortable playing. Marilyn made some really great comments about practicing non-attachment to what they're taking away. You can only have your intention on what you're hoping to facilitate, but you have no idea what they gathered and took along with them. So that's also a way to think about it from both the teacher's perspective and the students. I actually think when you're planning a workshop, as you both have pointed out, you're thinking simultaneously about both sides, trying to be as equal as you can. And I think sometimes when we're teaching a yoga class, we want to be that intentional every time we teach, but there's a lot of effort that goes into planning a workshop or a
Yes.
series or a training or a retreat that teaching a regularly scheduled class after a while doesn't require that type of bandwidth for lots of reasons as well that we're going to get into tonight. Any final thoughts, Marilyn?
Just do it.
Way to encourage. I appreciate you joining us. Marilyn's graduated almost a year ago at this point, and I haven't been bombarding her with grad school emails, but there's been some topics in the most recent weeks where I'm like, where's my Marilyn? Also, I knew that she was working on her arthritis course and projects quite intensely, so I wanted to honor that space as well. And even though we all are comfortable with receiving like hellos and where you at and what you've been doing. Sometimes that kind of lives in your subconscious and you feel like you're supposed to be somewhere you're not supposed to be. So, Marilyn, thank you. I have selectively included you in certain emails, and I was hopeful without actually messaging you that you would jump on tonight. And look at that, I won.
You did, you did.
Thanks for being here. We so appreciate you and look forward to seeing all the great things that you're continuously doing on your journey as a fantastic yoga teacher.
You knew that therapy thing was going to happen, didn't you?
I did. From the moment I was able to hear Marilyn articulate her experiences as a student, I was like, you're going to be a yoga therapist because your mindset was just formulated to a different perspective than our typical eight-limbed practice would guide you on. And I mean, Marilyn has a father in his 90s and
97.
97, and he is a practitioner of this wonderful philosophy. And, Marilyn was such a joy to have in our live sessions, when she was active in the course. And yeah, we all have our special gifts and we all have our special skill sets and we have our histories. And some of us, such as myself, I needed to be trained into a yoga therapy role. And then sometimes you meet someone and you're like, wow, this is just inherent to how you think. Like the questions Marilyn would ask, her inquiries were very therapeutically designed. And that's really cool because it took me a while to think from that lens or that perspective, you know? So you can always kind of feel each teacher's sort of just natural state. And it's fun for me because I get to observe and, just get to enjoy the presence of all of you. So, yes, Marilyn, the yoga therapist, no shocker. Keep us afloat on all the things you're doing, workshops you're teaching specifically, anything else that you have going on in the future. I would happily love to share that with everyone, even if it's outside of our regular YBJ studio platform. It's just nice to know what you're up to.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, my dears. Well, I am going to continue tonight's conversation since both of these wonderful teachers have given us so much to work from. We're going to have a few little journal prompts of our own, and I'm looking down at my notes here. And I know you're wondering what's going on with this crazy red wall behind me. Well, I had nowhere else to move myself, so I'm in a very strange little space. That's all I'm going to tell you. I might as well be in a box. And the only place that I could have a background that it looks like it's fake, but it's real, was this crazy red wall. So, first time I think I've ever recorded on something so, but maybe it's caught your attention for tonight. Okay.
Root
All right.
chakra. Root chakra.
Yes. Yes, I love that. Yes,
Yep.
grounded energy. Okay, I like that. I like that. Thank you. Um, I appreciate that actually. Yeah. Okay, my dears. So we're gonna have some journal prompts that you can type in the chat. That would be awesome. Or you can keep to yourself and think about and just take it in, whatever works for you here. Have you ever attended a workshop? And if so, what were some of the topics that you attended? So we'll just start there. As you're typing in the chat or thinking to yourself, I'll share of some of the workshops that I most recall from my earlier journeys as a yoga practitioner. So I remember actually going to, I think it was like a headstand. I think it might have been an inversion, but I feel like all I remember was the headstand part. And it was a headstand workshop. And it wasn't about necessarily getting into headstand. Although, most everyone was showing who was going was wondering like, how do I get this perfect headstand, this perfect pose, this perfect inversion, whatever you want to think about that particular asana. The instructor, the teacher who guided that workshop taught us about the crown chakra. Shout out to you, Deb. taught us about feeling our energy in reverse, feeling the world upside down. I mean, it was philosophical. Yes, did that teacher teach us lots of awesome tips and tricks and ways to experience lots of variations of headstand, modifications, progressions, and so on? Absolutely. And did that teacher teach it well? Yes. There were students in that class that probably never did a headstand that walked away with a new way to, you know, articulate that in their physical. There were teachers who could press right up into a headstand, but found a new way to do that with better breath work. It was pretty much, from my perspective of looking back, one of the most perfect workshops. It included all of these physical elements, but it included so much more than just, you're going to learn to do a headstand today. And it was just designed really, really well. One of the things I remember that teacher doing specifically was walking around and spending a private moment with every single student on their level. So if you were already in a headstand, let's say, this this teacher would work on your breath, sit there for a couple of seconds and hear you taking in those deeper inhalations and those slower exhales, for example. If you were brand new, it was like teaching you how to walk your toes to your nose or whatever the case was in those situations. So it was really well designed, especially coming from a perspective of such a challenging pose that people are really afraid of if they're concerned about doing that type of an inversion, or students that are really overzealous about those type of inversions because they want to master a headstand. And it was just taught in a way that you walked away no matter where you were on your journey, feeling very secure about the progress that you're making. So it was really done well. I'm going to read some examples that are coming up in the chat. So excited. Okay, Deb, that's from earlier. Kelly says, I've been to a sound bowl workshop, but not anything specifically in yoga. Yes, sound healing is a part of yoga. It so is, yes. And actually thinking about a sound bowl workshop, I think in one of our presentations in the course where I go over sound healing, I shared, and I'm pretty sure I did this, I shared some links to videos where you can watch the differences between the different sound bowls when you add water into a sound bowl and you play music with it. But obviously, I wasn't teaching a specific workshop, so I can only imagine how wonderful that would be adding to the yogic experience. Anyone who's ever taken a musical class workshop has probably experienced something really profound. Allison says headstand workshop, Tai Chi. Ooh, was that recent? And Ver's gratitude workshops. Yes, which turned into a beautiful series, which she taught very independently one by one. And we'll talk about that. Joella says tips manifestation. Yes, 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 yes. I did that one at some point, or one of hers. Let's see. Jen says I went to Katie's workshop on the warrior poses. Yes, Katie's warrior pose workshops series still sticks with my soul. She discussed the background and history, and this is when I had first started in the 300 hour. Katie, for those of you who don't know, she's already graduated the 300-hour program, and she did this as her karma class offerings. I also learned more on getting into the poses, especially Warrior 3. I think doing a workshop on the warriors is really brilliant. Raquel says, I went to 2 yoga retreats this year, a Tai Chi workshop, a wellness workshop hosted by a fellow 200-hour graduate, and a couple of meditation manifestation workshops. The overall goal was to try new types of yoga and deepen my practice. I also have a few planned for December. Jen says, I went to Tiffany's New Year's workshop in sound healing, journaling, and manifestation. Julie says seasonal yoga workshops. Ooh, I like the word seasonal. It makes me think of Ayurveda. Deb says I have participated in so many. Ah, I love that. If that is a part of your jam, very, very brilliant. Once I learned how workshops are operated in our yoga space, I did the same thing, Deb. I went to as many as I could because I realized it was like this world of knowledge in 2 hours. Lisa says I did Tiff's headstand workshop. Ooh, awesome. I don't know if I knew she did that. I love that. I love that pretty much everyone who's here live has attended workshops, or at least what they consider to be workshops. That's wonderful. I too have gone to many, many, many. So, and they all have their specialties and they all have some purpose. And again, what I personally loved about them was it felt very finite in my experience, meaning I could go to a workshop, I could feel like I had this deep practice, I learned something, and that was it, right? I could take it on with me if I chose to. And it just felt very complete. It felt fulfilling for me. And we used to have yoga festivals, especially, all around the country, and they're starting to come back, especially some of the larger ones. And I love yoga festivals. I've taught at a couple of yoga festivals, and that experience is like you're going to multiple workshops, right? It's not sometimes it feels like you're just taking multiple classes. Most of the time it feels like you're taking workshops, right? And we're going to talk about why those differences exist. Okay. So let's talk about the differences. That's what's next on my notes. So let's do it. Okay, so first things first, join us in the chat, okay? So what are your thoughts on what the expectation of a yoga class is as a student? So not as a teacher, but as a student, you're just going to a yoga class on a Thursday evening. What do you believe that experience is, or that class represents, or what do you feel like you're trying to get out of it? Any way you want to describe it. Join me in the chat. I just want to get some of your thoughts. Julie says time for themselves. Yes, time for yourself. That's a great answer. Time for yourself. So just popping into one of your neighborhood yoga classes to take time out for yourself. I love it. What else is coming up for you? Movement and breath connection for Joella. So Joella's focused on the actual practice of asana and pranayama, the movement and breath connection. Love that. Marilyn says, as a student, it is a time to relax and not be responsible for others. I like that. Relax, absolutely. I like the idea of not responsible for others. That's interesting. What else is coming up for you? Allison says to be guided into embodiment. Uh-oh, I'm losing the chat. To be guided into the embodiment, to sense where you are in the body and mind. I love that. So basically, this true presence. Kelly says a great asana practice where I can allow any tension and stress to go, to escape from the world for a bit. Okay, so notice some common themes coming up in your answers, which I'm sure represent each other really well. We're talking about being present. We're talking about letting go, not thinking outside of that moment. That's what our expectation is when we're going to a class, right? Let's see, we have another comment. Jen says, I go with the hope of a whole body, mind, and heart flow, feeling balanced and relaxed. I love this. Okay, so hold on to these thoughts because these thoughts don't disappear just because we go to a workshop or something else. Instead, they might become more expansive. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So now, what is your expectation when you go, if you've ever attended a yoga retreat, which in this context is not the same thing as a workshop. When you think retreat, I want whatever that word retreat means for you. If you've never done a quote unquote yoga retreat, because just because someone calls it a retreat doesn't mean you retreat it, right? So allow that word to express what you believe a yoga retreat would be if you've never experienced it. And if you have, awesome. And so let us know, what would you say the expectation of attending a yoga retreat would be in a posed, I don't know if oppose is the right word, but not just utilizing your thoughts that you've already shared on class.
Huh.
Hi.
Well, so I have had the pleasure of attending an yoga retreat. It was very beautiful. And it met all my expectations.
What were your expectations, though? That's the question. What were your expectations?
It was more of a spiritual journey.
Okay.
Yeah. And that
Okay.
was it. Honestly, it was more of a like that was what I was looking for. And that's what I felt like I needed at that moment. And that's what I received.
I love that
And
because it looks like it's in line with what some of the other teachers are saying in the chat as well. So
yes,
let's think about that. Let's think about if you consider yourself going on a retreat, specifically a yoga retreat, then you're hoping to have maybe like some sort of a spiritual awakening of some sort. Marilyn says, retreat means a learning experience. I go with the expectation that I will come away with something. Love that. Raquel says, retreat is full immersion and connection with people you never knew you needed in your life. Wow.
hi
Wow.
Raquel. I've been on a retreat with you. Mwah.
Yeah, me and
Hi,
Deb
honey.
were, I guess not bunkmates because Kat was my bunkmate, but we shared the same.
We did.
Yeah,
I
I love it.
know.
I'm thinking it's
Mwah.
Kristen and Laura's retreat.
yeah, this was the first one in Hema's. They're doing another one coming up this year.
That's
Um,
right.
but yeah, you just make that connection with these people that it felt like camp. It really did.
It
I
did.
love that. Okay, let's
Yeah.
use that word camp. Let's hold on
Mm-hmm.
to that word because these are all going to come back to help us later. Kelly
Mm-hmm.
says, I haven't been to a retreat. I would expect to have time to focus on the physical practice as well as dive deeper spiritually. Look at that. And to connect with others who are on the same journey. Wow, did she not just sum up Deb and Raquel's thoughts right there? Okay, so hold on to those ideas of retreat. All right, what about a series? A series would mean something that is continuously happening that's related to the same thing, right? The same topic. So, what would be your expectation if you were taking a series? Raquel says building on skills. And I want to back up really quick because Jen, I don't want to miss your comment. Jen says, especially you were probably typing this all out. Jen says, with retreat, when I think of going to retreat, I look for things relevant to my interests, but also something I may not have thought of. It's a getaway from the stressors, a spiritual experience and connection. Love it. Okay, so Raquel, back to the idea of a series. Raquel says building on skills. I like the word building and the word skills here. Deb, I see ya. Come on down.
Oh, oh. Hi. So for me, just this, yes, building on skills, embodiment. That's the one thing that I've look embodiment of an I. Yes, I see that on Marilyn. I have my yes. It's it's perfect. Like really trying to embody what it is. And what it is, that's a big question. Like, what is it? Like, what is this? Like, who am I? Where am I going? What am I supposed to be doing? Am I a healer? Am I healed? Am I, what am I? Like, just going with the flow and yes, just the to internalize all the things and just be very open and have so many different experiences. Um, and when you are able to experience that, and like I said, so Raquel was one of my butt mates, and I had several, And we really connected. Like Raquel was one of those that we went and we embodied like the spiritual aspect of doing the internal spiritual retreat that I feel like we both went there for. Right, Raquel? We were there like very early. There was only a couple of us there, and Raquel was one of them. And it's just, searching and trying to find the embodiment and being able to share that with other people. I feel like that's the most important thing is like once you get it, you have to share it with other people.
I
Yeah.
love that. So, in coming back to walking away from retreats, but thinking about the series idea instead, Marilyn
Mhm.
says embodiment of an idea. So, taking an idea and creating this embodiment of it, and it becomes a part of her being. That's her expectation if she's going to do like a multi-layer event, right? It's like a retreat is retreating away, but a series is maybe not that same retreat but creating this more lateral experience of this particular topic, for example. Allison says the ability to return to the topic, love that. The ability to return to the topic and really process and internalize or integrate the topic. So, the idea that Allison is taking from this is maybe in a workshop, you have this one stop moment, right? But then we turn that into a multiple layered or multiple day. As Marilyn mentioned, she had a 2 day workshop, which could be considered potentially a version of a series. For those of you who mentioned Veronica's workshop she was doing, that was a great example of taking a workshop and turning it into a series. Raquel says you can incorporate series in your weekly teaching and classes. Yes, 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 yes. And my hope for your takeaway tonight is not only how to plan a quote unquote perfect workshop, but how to teach workshop style classes. Shall you choose and knowing why that would benefit your students, but also why it will possibly hinder their experience in that particular process as well, which some of you mentioned when you talked about what your expectations are when you're going to all of these different things. Hold on to those thoughts, all of you, because when you think about your expectations, give me just a sec. When you think about your expectations versus get embodied and have a spiritual awakening, if I have that expectation for a Thursday night class and it doesn't happen, that's a challenge, right? It's also maybe not a fair expectation. But is that true going away to the retreat? Does the facilitator need to incorporate these elements that their students are hoping to walk away with? Jen, come on back down. And Raquel says the theme can also be simple like hip opener series. Yes. Yes, and we'll talk about the idea of creating an experience for your students, which is what you all are trying to do in some capacity and applying it to the right places. Jen, what did you want to share with us?
Um, my expectations, I've seen some of it like in Katie's class and even Ver's, I've took hers. But my thought is it's like you have a theme and then you build on it through various little sections and then it all ties together into the whole thing. That's
No, that's great. I love that you used the word theme. I was trying not to use that word just a minute ago because A, it was meant for you, but B, because we all at the 200-hour level, that was what we learned, right? We learned how to theme. And when you think about theming, as Raquel mentioned, when you have like a hip opener series, and as Jen solidified in her thoughts, well, how do we turn that theme into a topic, right? A topic. So a theme can be anything, but if we turn it into a topic that has a result, right, that we're hoping our students walk away with, that's where it becomes really interesting under this guise of workshopping. Okay, So now let's break it down. And don't worry, in our course, I will make sure my notes are included in there. You can take your own notes and journal as you see fit, or just hang out and participate / listen and visualize. But I will include these thoughts in the course, so don't worry about that. I like to think, and remember, this is just based on my personal thoughts as a yoga teacher and facilitator. So there are lots of thoughts out there about creating workshops and creating the perfect workshop as a yoga teacher. But in thinking about all the workshops I've attended, provided, and so on, working with all of you lovely teachers and lots of other teachers, and observing how they've worked on these workshops and being behind the scenes as a studio manager and so on, I've learned a lot about ways that you can think about workshopping. And I believe that there are 3 parts of a workshop that really have to be broken down. The first part is your intention, right? And I mean, duh, our intention as yoga teachers sets the tone for everything, but we're going to further break that down in a moment. Second thing is promise. So first is intention, number 2 is promise, and number 3 is the business component. So 3 parts to a workshop: the intention, the promise, and the business component. And we're going to talk about all of that, because no matter where you've been as a workshop planner, facilitator, or practitioner, these 3 components were most likely included, especially if you enjoyed and had a great experience. So let's talk about the intention. This is a little bit deeper than the ideas of Sankalpa that come through the yamas and niyamas, specifically the niyamas. This is more about, what are you passionate about? Where do you feel your expertise can be lended? And in doing so, creating that vision and a goal. Now, here's the challenge as yoga teachers. In our philosophical studies, we are taught, obviously, right, especially through the yamas and niyamas, that goals and all of these things are not necessarily the way that we wish to have a spiritual experience, right? Sadhana. Now, when we're thinking about planning as facilitators, guides, and teachers with our students in mind, we have this duality, right? We want exactly what I like to circle back to what Marilyn said earlier, which is, I'm not going to be attached to what the experience is going to be, but I will have a way that I conduct this experience. And whatever happens was meant to be. I'm not going to become too obsessed and overtly focused on what could have been better and what went wrong, but rather having the experience for myself. Marilyn also said a part of what she took away from teaching in these workshops was she felt like she learned so much, which I have to agree with Marilyn. Part of the time when I'm planning or teaching, I feel like I learned more than anybody else who was involved. I'm like, whoa, because you're digging, you're researching, you're learning about yourself, you're learning about your students, you're seeing things in real time. I want to share some of the thoughts that are coming up. Raquel says you can incorporate series in your weekly. Oh, I already read that earlier. The theme. Okay, what? I thought something new came up. Okay, sorry. I don't know what's happening with my chat.
Idea of like the people who are hosting it learning more. I feel like I've noticed that so much. Even if it's someone who I know is like my teacher, like I feel that they leave that with much more knowledge and confidence in their teaching than maybe when they started, especially if you talk to them before and they're like, I'm nervous. And then at the end, it's like, they did it. And even with my teachers that have been doing it for decades, like you can even tell like their confidence at the end of it too.
I love that. I love that that's your observation. And Marilyn says business equals
Yeah,
money.
that's
And
your third point. You can go on.
Oh, no, but I love this because we're going to talk about that. But I do want to read your comment. It says, we don't like to think about it as yogis, but as a business, we have to think about paying the bills. And we're going to talk a lot about that too, because we are professionals, right? And a big component of that is setting up an expectation for what that looks like for yourself as a teacher. And we will definitely get there. So your intention, what are you passionate about? What do you feel you have expertise in? As Raquel just mentioned, what expertise do you maybe have a little nervousness about, right? There's some room for you to grow, but you're confident in, and it's only going to build upon that confidence. So, great way to say that. What experience do you wish for your students to walk away with? We've been talking a lot about that. What is the desired outcome? Not necessarily what do you desire in the outcome, but what is the desired outcome? And so a good example could be, what do I hope they take away from this? What part of this topic matters the most? You know, Marilyn mentioned it best. If we have a list of things that we're teaching, it doesn't mean we're going to be able to elaborate or express or even teach that entire list. So if I had to only think about, out of all the things I'm hoping my student takes away from this, what's the one thing, right? Deb, come on down. And I am going to get a little bit more serious about time here in just a moment so I can
Okay.
get through this, but come on
All
down.
right, I'll make it quick. So a lot of the what I have experienced from the participants that I have is everyone's there because of some kind of trauma, because that's how it began, trauma informed. Okay. So everyone is working through their own life experiences, and we're not picking on one thing or the other. It's just a overall, like, what is our body feeling? How do we experience it? How do we hold it in our body? And how are we able to release it? And for me, that's the most important thing, like, because everyone has a story, and we don't even have to name it. Like, we don't have to label it. We don't have to but we all feel it. And so, and able to like compress it and then release it is the most important thing. And so I'll just keep it short and sweet. And so that's what we're working on. And I feel like the people that are coming, the women that are coming to my gentle yoga is what we're calling it. um, they're experiencing it, and the feedback has been just, I had no idea, but it's really awesome. So I just wanted to share that. So thank you.
I love it. I love it.
And I everything I learned from you. So
Well, it
thank
was
you so
already
much.
in you. You know, I'm just helping you
You have,
acknowledge those parts
and
of
I
yourself.
just, I have no words, honestly. Like, thank you so much.
No, it's exciting. And I think that this is, you know, kind of just to go a little bit off script for a moment. This is the benefit as a yoga teacher, is to have
Mhm.
conversations and these experiences. This is the hope, right? It doesn't always result in an
Yeah.
instantaneous reflection, but when it does, it makes all the hard work that we put into our sankalpa, our intentions worth it. I love that. Thank you,
Yes.
Deb. So
Thank
I want
you.
to I want to recap this part so we can keep it nice and clean from the next part. So remembering that we have what I consider to be three main parts to a workshop. Number one's intention, number two's promise, number three is the business component. And number one, intention, we ask ourselves, what are we passionate about? What do we feel we have expertise in? What is our vision and our goal? Which can really be summed up to, what experience do we want our students to have? What do we hope they walk away with? What do we hope their takeaway is? What do we want that desired outcome to be? And one of the things that I think is important is that we don't make this too complicated for ourselves, but we also don't make it too fluffy, right? And when I say fluffy, you know, I could say, hey, I'm teaching this workshop on pranayama, 4-part breathing. And at the end of the day, I hope everyone walks away just feeling relaxed and happy. Well, that's great. That's a little fluffy. I want to have a takeaway that gives me some deeper guidelines and awareness to introduce. So, what would be a great takeaway if my workshop was 4-part breathing or pranayama practice, breath control? Well, I would want them to walk away knowing exactly what the 4 parts are. right? Not necessarily that they can experience the four parts within their body, but that they understand the differences between each part of the breathwork practice through pranayama, that they understand the philosophy of pranayama, and that they have the benefit in mind and they understand the science behind it to back the potential spiritual enhancement that they may receive. So we don't want to make it so fluffy, right? Where it's just a Thursday night class where we can be as fluffy as we like. We want there to be a takeaway because, again, that's going to lead into the business component later. Deb, thanks for raising the roof. I like that. It won't be on the recording, but just so y'all know. Marilyn says a tangible walkaway. Yes, a tangible walkaway. And we're going to come back to that idea at the end as well. So when someone says, how was it? They can say, I learned fill in the blank. Yes, absolutely. And when your students, for all of my educators out there, when your students aren't able to articulate what they learned, they can articulate what you were teaching. And there's a difference, right? Maybe I don't know what I've learned, but I definitely know Raquel was teaching us about finance today. She was teaching us how to balance our checkbook. Do people do that anymore? Anyway, that's a real cool, tangible idea. Maybe I don't know how to do it, but I definitely know what Raquel's topic was and what her goal was when I took her seminar today, for example. And Raquel, I think you're in law and not finance, but that's okay.
I do teach law and personal finance.
Oh, look at that. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. You just smell like money, girl. Okay. So, alrighty. So there we have it. That's the first part, intention. Now let's talk about the promise, because this is where it's going to get real good. And this is where it's going to really remind you of your purpose. Promise. Are you teaching them to learn a new skill or to advance a current skill? Many of you mentioned this when we were having our chats. You mentioned skills. You mentioned learning a new skill. Some of you even mentioned advancing or enhancing a current skill. So this is the promise. Do you have a promise to your students that they're going to learn something new or advance or enhance something they already know? Now, this kind of has a weird little play on what I just mentioned, as Deb is saying, no expectations, which is we don't always know what they're going to learn, right? Learning is very subjective, but are you going to teach them? So there's a difference there again. Is our intention, is our promise to try to teach this experience that we want them to have. Our other promise is understanding the why and providing them with the why. Understanding the why and providing them with the why. So just because I'm going to teach you about yoga philosophy doesn't mean that that is going to necessarily be true, factual, right, understood, correct, however you want to put it. But if I can teach you the why I am teaching you this thing, even if for some reason that doesn't make sense in the moment to your student, you are still able to convey the why. And that's really important. I don't know if you've ever gone to something where you were trying to learn a new skill or enhance a current skill, and you had no idea why the teacher, instructor, facilitator was teaching something that you couldn't correlate to the thing you were there for. Maybe they could correlate it in their mind, but they weren't teaching you that why. And I think that's really challenging, especially for adults teaching adults. When we're teaching children, we can have the wherewithal or the foresight to understand why we're teaching a certain topic or a subject, and we can trust the experience that the student will get. But when you're teaching an adult, that is definitely not the case, right? We're teaching from a different perspective, an already settled nervous system, so to speak. Adults are always going to question, even if it's just subconsciously, why am I supposed to be learning this right now? It's just in the back of their head. Why would I care about this? Why would I care about the sentence you just said? So we want to already meet those objections by understanding the why. And understanding the why, as many of us learned in our 200-hour program, then you already understand the benefit, right? Because you're looking for that correlation, that benefit to the why. I'm going to teach you why I'm teaching you it this way, why I'm telling you to try it this way, whatever the case may be, because here's the benefit. If you do the thing, this is the benefit of that thing. Versus, let's just use esoterics, right? Let's use subtle body chakras. That's really a good one. Because if we just teach the chakras without the why, without the benefit, you might have lost your student at the word chakra, right? Because it's not something, especially for an adult, that they might be able to correlate to something factual. Same with breath work, same with meditation. I mean, really, if you think about it from a yoga teacher's perspective, or any subject for that matter, we really need that why, and we really need that benefit to back it up. Now, with all that said, that should give you what your student is walking away with, and that should take you back to your original intention anyway. So once you set your intention, which is all of the things we talked about, having the vision and the goal, your expertise and your passion, and you mirror that or match it to the why, and you're able to extract the benefit, then you've just created the intention and the promise of that intention. Now, once you do those two things, you are already most of the way there, and we'll break down the anatomy of a workshop in a moment. Finally, I'm going to touch on the business of yoga, but we're going to or the business of workshops and in general, I suppose, yoga in a lot of ways. And we'll touch back on this a little bit throughout the rest of tonight's presentation. But I want you to think about these things because, again, you can have the intention, you can have the promise, but you also need to have that business component. It really does matter. And it matters not necessarily just because of the financial aspect, which is important, and we will talk about that, but because of the professionalism that you need to present. The professionalism is going to help solidify your intention and the promise that you're setting. So if you have a business orientation, a professional consideration, then it's going to round out the process. I don't know about you, but I definitely, even if I'm not fully cognizant and have a cognitive awareness of what I'm participating in, I know when I pay for the ticket and I show up and there's some rules to follow, there's some things I need to do, I have to meet the other party halfway, then I am going to be more invested in the experience that I also am in charge of, which is important. So that business component is ideal because you do want your students to have some skin in the game, essentially. And Marilyn says absolutely. Now, this doesn't always mean money. I mean, when we tell our students to show up with their mat versus they show up without a mat and there's no mat for them to borrow, right? Something as simple as that is an investment in the process. Showing up at a certain time, being committed to that amount of time. If you're teaching a workshop that's 80 minutes and the students leave at 50, all of them, most of them, then you might not meet that intention and promise. So there's definitely an expectation that all parties involved have, and we want to remember that. Now, how do we set those expectations is what we're going to continue to talk about. So the biggest question that I want you to ask yourself if you are thinking about the business component is, how are you going to make sure to deliver on your promise?
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
I feel like okay. I feel like what I'm providing is like a gift, right? And for me to ask for money to do some things, I'm quite concerned, like if it's a gift, like you're providing, is that going to go away if you're profiting from that experience?
So remember that money is just one currency. one currency. What is
Yeah.
probably the most important currency? Anyone want to just come off the mic and say it? Bigger than money.
It's just a heart. It's that
Time. Allison says time.
nice
When you're giving your time and the expectation is that they're giving you the full 80 minutes of their time or whatever it is,
energy.
then
I see that.
that's the currency as well. So we don't want to, business doesn't have to equate money. Business should equate to professionalism. Julie says
Yeah.
energy, right? Money
Yep.
is just one part. Money is just a very small part. Marilyn says giving them yourself.
Because
Yeah.
it's for me, it's not about the money. And
So stay with me. Stay with me. I have a lot
okay.
more to present, and I
Okay.
think by the time we get towards the end of this, you'll realize what I'm actually trying to get you to walk away with.
Okay. I'm so sorry. I'm
No,
sorry.
you're good, my dear. But hang with me, stay with me, okay? Make sure you allow yourself to experience these ideas and challenge these ideas with your own, but be careful not to get so focused on the one thing that we kind of miss the overall point of creating a workshop. Now, remember, we're talking about creating a workshop. In a upcoming session, we're going to do private sessions. And although there are some similarities, obviously, as there is from teaching a class to teaching a retreat to teaching a festival, there are definitely differences, big time. Okay. So, one of my goals is that you, as a yoga teacher, doesn't clump all categories into one, but also doesn't divide them so much that you're the yoga teacher who never does a workshop. You're the yoga teacher who never does a private session. You're the yoga teacher that would never do a retreat, right? That's why in our sequencing submissions, all of these things, it's to get us to remember that there's commonalities, there's a foundation to all of it, but there are indeed differences, and we want to master those differences so that we can feel confident and comfortable in teaching in those various ways and allowing those experiences to grow, which my thought would be growing into a full-on training program, right? Or a full-on festival or whatever that bigger audacious goal might be for you under that same category. Yes. Okay, so back to the question. How are you going to make sure to deliver on your promise? If you can answer that question, then that is the biggest part in my estimation of the business component. How are you going to make sure to deliver on your promise? Your promise, just as a reminder, are you teaching them to learn a new skill or to advance a current skill? What is the why? What is the benefit? What do you want your students to walk away with? And of course, you can keep answering those questions and asking more. Okay, so now continuing to explore the business component. So here are some thoughts that I have that I want you to just wrestle with. I'm going to kind of go through them a little bit, you know, through. So stay with me. Understanding your student. Understanding your student is one of the biggest parts of the business component. Who is your student? You know, if I am wanting to teach a spiritual awakening, would I want to teach that to 6-year-olds? Right? So, I mean, maybe. Actually, they might have a quicker awakening if we're being quite honest. We just need to be able to recognize it. We need to know all the signs. But, you know, when we start to think about workshops, if I'm creating a prenatal workshop, if it's based on Ayurvedic Abhyanga and it's just for prenatal, well, I want to make sure my students are in that prenatal process, whatever that I need that to look like. Maybe they're planning on wanting to be expecting, maybe they already are expecting. But I definitely wouldn't want anyone who wouldn't have any interest in that to be at that workshop. So that's the biggest part of the business component. Why does that matter? Because sometimes I've been guilty of this as well. I just want to plan a workshop. I just want to plan a workshop. I just want a workshop on Sunday afternoon at 2, and I want it to be this topic. And I hope that these perfect people will show up to my workshop. And that's not necessarily being business oriented, not really thinking about, well, what happens if the people who are showing up aren't really open to receive? And we talked a little bit about that earlier. You might think because you have a topic on the schedule that everyone that shows up is interested in that topic. Well, that's just like saying that if I have a store in the mall, that all the people that go to the mall will eventually buy from my store. Not necessarily a fact, right? So I would like to have a little bit more intention and a lot more promise built into that component on the business side of things. So I want to know who I would want my students to be and also who shouldn't or wouldn't benefit from that particular workshop. And why do I think? Could I be wrong? Sure, there's always an exception, but we want to be ahead of ourselves and we want to think about the rule. So if Marilyn's teaching an arthritis workshop, my guess is that she's teaching to people who are either um, bargaining with that ailment, know somebody who is thinking they might, or is curious, right? But she's probably not thinking about the student who has no interest in it at all. But she is probably prepared to help a student gather some awareness, shall one stumble into that workshop where they weren't really that invested or interested in it. Maybe they were dragged along to the workshop somehow. Marilyn's still thinking about, well, what could they also take away from this experience, shall they arrive? That's very well rounded. That's not always easy to do, and it's very hard to plan for all of those different variations, but that is our job. Yeah? Okay. Next part is thinking about the minimum number of students as well as the maximum number of students that you would ideally like in that workshop for reasons other than financial and space, although both of those matter, but also because of safety reasons. Do I want 52 people doing a headstand? Maybe, maybe not. If I have 52 people, how many teachers or helpers or guides do I need to incorporate into my plan to help me offer a better opportunity for each person to experience this benefit? If I only have one student, does that change the nature of the workshop as well, or does it not? I've taught workshops where I was on the schedule to teach a certain workshop every single month, and sometimes there was one student and sometimes there was 20, but the workshop could work for one student without it turning into a private session, meaning I'm a little bit interested in what you're bringing to the workshop today so that I can help facilitate a better experience for you. But it's also not all about just your thing, because I also want you to learn something maybe you didn't know you needed to learn, right? So it's kind of like I'm still going to teach math, even if it's one person or 10, but I'm not going to teach calculus if you're only in your multiplication tables, right? Marilyn says, how many can I make a connection with? Exactly. These are the questions to ask yourself. Sometimes we think about how many students we want in our class. And for those of you who are needing to think about finances, because there's a lot of reasons why we need to think about finances, we'll talk about that in a second, then you just think a head count. And I want you to get well beyond that, well beyond a head count. I want you to think about the why. Next part is duration. Some of you mentioned this already. Understanding the magnitude of timing. The biggest thing I see with brand new workshop teachers is they forget to time in Q&A, or time in spontaneous conversation, or time in needing to deal with any unexpected scenarios at the beginning of class, such as, oh, I wasn't expecting that we were going to need to reposition all the mats a certain way. So that's going to take 5 minutes. Bathroom breaks. I've been guilty of that. Anyone who's taken my anatomy and physiology in 200 hour, I was notorious for forgetting to like offer bathroom breaks. It was just in my head, you'll take them when you need to go. But students would just be listening in on everything I was sharing with them and wouldn't want to leave their mat, which is awesome, but also negligent on my part. And it finally took me downloading all of the trainers in our teaching cohort videos to notice mine was the only one that had almost 100% of the allotted time recorded, which should not be a thing. So if you have a 2 hour workshop and you're recording it, you shouldn't have 2 hours of content, is all I'm saying. Not if it's live, right? You should have at least 10 minutes that you pressed pause so everybody could go to the bathroom or something. So those are some of the things that you learn through trial and error. Now, obviously there's some ways to get around that, but just one of those things that I've noticed. Post workshop. Maybe your workshop's an hour and a half. Are you going to commit to staying 30 more minutes after, an hour after, having some sidebar conversation? Do you need to clean up and go? Are you renting a space? Do you have additional time? All of those things, right? And we don't always think about those things, but when you're faced with those questions or those concerns and you haven't considered them, but you've already marketed your workshop and that sort of thing, then you'll kind of learn this the harder way, right? So maybe you rented a space for 2 hours, your workshop is an hour and 45 minutes, and you totally forgot about cleanup and so on and so forth or whatever. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So I just want to add, like, if you have the opportunity to go to many types of different workshops, then you'll kind of get a feel, right, for how they should roll out.
Yes and
And
no, right? Because
well,
I know for me, when I go to workshops, I'm not thinking about the teacher, I'm thinking about myself as the student, which is why I asked you that question earlier.
exactly.
Think about your experience as the student, but a
Yes,
student isn't thinking about, oh, I wonder how long they rented this space for. I wonder how long they're going to give us Q&A at the end. So that's the challenge. That is the challenge in the entire spectrum of being a yoga teacher because
agreed.
you're also a student. So even when you're teaching your regularly scheduled classes on a Tuesday morning, when you took a class like that as a student, I promise you did not think about all the challenges that the teacher has to think about, right? The music, the temperature, whatever, right? The technology is a big one nowadays that teachers have to tangle with, and it really does take away from the experience as a teacher, having to worry about Zooms and cameras and check-ins and checkouts and so on, right? It really does take away from the moment. So, yes and no. I would love to say
Yes.
that if we observed people doing amazing things, we would just pick it up by osmosis. But unfortunately, our learning styles, which we're going to talk about again in a minute, is a
Okay.
big hindrance on that. Yeah, but great point.
Okay.
Great point.
Gotcha.
And thanks for bringing that up because we could think that. We really could think if I just take all of Maryland's upcoming workshops, I'm going to learn how to be a better. No, hopefully Maryland gets us embodied. How many of you said embodiment is an expectation of a lot of your experiences as a student, right? So embodiment is just that. I am now so present. I couldn't care less what timing Marilyn has, what Raquel has in her notebook, what Deb had planned for the topic. I am embodied. So hopefully as a yoga practitioner, I know some of us do take classes and we take notes, but I'm gonna tell you right now, I could probably say 100 classes where a teacher did something really awesome and I was like, don't forget that. And then the moment I rocked out, I never remembered that transition, that cue, that anything until months later. I'm like, oh my God, I remember when I took Raquel's class and she did that transition. But what was it? But that's a good sign that you were truly embodied. Yeah. Or have a bad memory. Okay. Boom, boom, boom. Alrighty, so I covered a lot of what I wanted to say in that quick little blurb, so that actually worked out really well. And then I want you to think about marketing. Marketing is really interesting. I don't want you to think about Facebook ads, although you can, or posters or postcards or ads or whatever. You can think about all of that, but I want you to think about marketing way more simple. And I feel like someone said it earlier up here and I read it. I want to find that comment. Okay, Raquel says it is a networking opportunity or a way to get students to come to your weekly classes or get private classes potentially and meet new yogi friends. Boom. Yes. When you think about marketing, I want you to just think about all that. You know, bringing up your workshop, bringing up these opportunities, thinking about during the workshop, offering those private sessions, noticing something. Hey, I noticed that, you might benefit from XYZ. Would you like to think about that? Using these opportunities, does it take a component of vulnerability and extroversion? Yes. But the more you are focused, just like we were talking about for those of you who attended the grant and nonprofit conversation we had recently, those of you who, those of us, when we are, I guess is what I should better say, invested in the benefit and we have the passion, the sales and marketing of that shouldn't feel like sales and marketing. It should feel natural and normal to just talk about the thing that gives you passion. Okay, so I've got a few more things for us to think about, some gentle ideas and journal prompting before we talk about the anatomy of a perfect workshop. And we should be right on schedule. I want to conclude it all nice in a bow. So let's talk about why your teaching style matters. So earlier we were talking about the idea that someone might not be ready to receive. Maybe you're hosting something that's really introspective or really challenging some of the parts of the student's mind body. And that's true. Those are all true. We also have to think about from the business idea, staying under that kind of business component category, the idea of understanding what your teaching style is. So to understand your teaching style, we have to revisit learning styles. Now, as yoga teachers, believe it or not, the more you teach asana specifically, the more likely you are probably somewhere in the realm of 3 out of the 4 natural teaching styles. So let's revisit what they are. We have visual, we have tactile, which is hands-on or kinesthetic. We have information or informational, and we have auditory. So let's think about that. Now, for those of us who have gone through some of these teachings through yoga grad school previously on learning styles, then you might recall, for those of you who haven't yet, we'll talk more about it in the future. The number one teaching style is visual. That's across the board, children, adults alike. Second to that is tactile or the hands-on. So I want to see it. I want to see it being performed, and then I want to do it. I want to touch it. I want to embody it. And then after that is information typically, and auditory is usually last, which I always say that I'm auditory first personally, which is interesting. But I do think that's something with English not being your first language. You tend to be auditory, and I could be making this up in my own head because I'm not sure I have a lot of data on this. But in some of my research that I've done, which is super informal, second language people, or you're not speaking your first language, auditory tends to really kick in for you, and then informational. But for the majority of your students, they're going to be visual or tactile, and they're going to have an auditory component. Information is important as well, right? Especially when you're in training or learning a new skill, having an opportunity. Raquel says experience teaching is balancing. Thank you. And we're going to talk about that in workshopping. In my estimation, right? And apparently Raquel's as well. There should be a nice balance of all 4. There should be. So we're going to talk about what that could look like for you when you are planning your workshop. And I would say when you're planning your workshop, your series, your trainings, your courses, your retreats, you should try to incorporate all 4. The challenge with teaching just a regular class is you might not be able to do that. And we're going to talk about what that looks like. So first, let's remind ourselves what visual is. In a yogic capacity, this is demoing, right? This is demoing in a yogic capacity. Of course, it could be lots of other things. Maybe you have a slideshow, which I haven't seen. But if you're in a festival, you're in a workshop, maybe a training, Sure, you might have some prompts, you might have some models, maybe like the skeleton, things like that. Those are all visual. We have tactile or hands-on, right? So getting the student to experience the thing they're seeing in their own body, right? Or in their own physical, right? So it's not necessarily that they have to be embodied, but they have to have some sort of tactile expression of what it is you're teaching them. So, it's kind of like Simon Says, So maybe I'm raising the same hand you're raising. Maybe I'm closing my eyes when you close your eyes. Maybe I'm doing warrior two when you do warrior two. And then we have the idea of, I'm gonna just put it out of order because I don't know what order I just gave you all. Auditory. So this is lecturing, but in a yoga capacity, this could be the cueing that you do. This could be the describing of descriptors in words. This can be the sounds you make, the tone of your voice. So if I am talking faster, you know that we're coming closer to an end of tonight's session. But if I want to relax you, I'm probably going to slow it down. All of these things. You're playing with this concept. If you're teaching in a workshop environment, what could that look like for you? Maybe there's moments where you're really serious about something like an instruction. For example, let's go back to headstand. That's a little dangerous, especially with a group of people you may not have background information on, and they just stumbled into, I'm going to learn a headstand today on a random Saturday, right? Well, maybe your voice gets really stoic and monotoned when you're giving out instructions so that they pay attention and listen. Maybe your voice gets higher and louder and more articulate with each syllable so that they can hear all of the instructions really well. But when you're having fun, maybe you're joking and laughing and your voice is whimsical, and when you want them to relax at the end. So this is a great way to think about that. And maybe this is natural for you. Auditory might be very natural in your teaching style. Visual may be very natural in your teaching style. So first ask yourself, what is natural? Do you naturally demonstrate physically really well? Or are you like me where you say right hand and your left hand's up and everyone's confused, right? Are you very auditory? Are you great at expressing your voice? I mean, any of you who take Allie's class, she's very good with her voice, right? If you are more tactile, some teachers like Laura, for example, are really good at getting students to express themselves, get them into the experience versus visualizing the experience, hearing the experience, imagining it. She wants you feeling it on your own. And I'm just thinking about, my experiences with all the different trainers and such and teachers. And information, giving your students an opportunity to journal, to note take, to have a printout, to give them a reference, like look at the Bhagavad Gita verse, fill in the blank, look at the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, look at this chapter, this sutra. These are the sorts of things that gives that information in our world. We don't always get to have like this note-taking opportunity in a workshop, but maybe you can give them something that they can take away with them that they can look up or resource later. So as Raquel confirmed, in an ideal space, whenever we're trying to get our students to experience the opportunity to learn at their own pacing, through their own levels, and through repetition, we have to balance out these styles. But don't sleep on the idea of what your natural teaching style is. We all have something we're really great at. You all remember in university or K through 12, whatever your experience is in school, primary school, whatever, the teachers who are really good at giving you resources. Here's a book, here's this, check this out, here's this handout, versus the ones that were good at these other areas. So who are you already, and where would you like to develop your own personal skill in the future? Which one of these do you feel is more of your natural point? And what part is maybe a little bit lesser than for you. She's a little hot mess. We haven't done her hair today. So think about that. Are you visual? Oh, and let's layer on. And this is homework. Ask yourself, what's your natural teaching style? Visual, auditory, tactile, or informational? And what is your natural learning style? And do they match up? Do they match up? They don't have to, but do they? Just naturally. So, what areas do you feel you're already really natural at? And where would you like to improve? And of course, we want to improve on all of them, but where's your more weaker point? Okay. I personally love when teachers have a book for anything. Oh, here's a book for that. Here's a recipe for that. Here's a resource for that, because that's not necessarily my natural point. I love researching when someone gives me something to research. I love it. But having just a natural library living in my brain is a little bit challenging for me. Okay, so those are some homework points. All right. So as we start to come to a close, I have one more set of notes. Oh, I do have some stuff. Okay, we're still good. We're still good. Stay with me. All right. Actually, we're going to save that for the last. We're going to save that for the end. Let's talk about the anatomy of a perfect workshop, quote unquote perfect. Keep in mind, if you've ever attended a workshop, taught a workshop, or have already thought about planning your own, you may or may not have or be in total agreement with all of what I'm about to say, nor is what you already think or know wrong. Okay. This is just an easy, simple way for you to think about it. The anatomy of a perfect workshop. And I will definitely put this in the course. Number one, sounds simple. Introduce yourself and your expertise. Explain to them, oh my gosh, this is why I'm teaching you this thing today. This is my lived experience. Share your story. People love to hear why you're so invested in this moment. Share it. Don't be shy. And don't forget to, brag on yourself a little bit. Maybe you've spent the last several years really invested in this particular topic. Maybe you really think it healed you. Maybe you've seen and have testimonials from others. I could easily see Deb opening up, introducing herself, her history as a licensed or licensed mental health professional, and talking about all of the healing she's received, why she loves the subtle bodies, why she believes in trauma sensitive practices. She would really be able to articulate herself, her why, and the benefit. Don't forget to do that. Surprisingly, this is forgotten about a lot of the time. I even love hearing about how much Marilyn loves meditation, because Marilyn has talked about that quite a bit, to the point where it is enticing to experience her guidance through something she loves so dearly. I want to just experience what she's experiencing, or at least try, versus I'm just teaching a meditation workshop today. It could be anything. It could have been pranayama. It could have been on the yamas. It could have been anything. Today it's meditation. Even if you do teach all of those topics, have a reason and a benefit and a story that is expressive through all of those topics. So that's number one. Introduce yourself and your passion, your expertise in this topic. Obviously, you all know this. Number two, ground your students, right? Bring them into this lab that you are creating or simulating for them. Like when you're here, I want you to feel this thing. If I'm in a trauma sensitive space, I want to feel like an elevated sense of safety and groundedness. Something even if it's just in my mind, I'm like, wow, I'm really going to be seen today. I'm not going to be forced to do anything today that I don't want to. Not that we ever should, but it's life. Or Marilyn, I want to really feel like I'm stepping into, what did the word Marilyn use earlier? Spa. So I want to feel that experience, whatever that is. So grounding your students. Number three is really important, bonding yourself to them and potentially bonding them to each other. This can look like so many things. This is a really beautiful creative moment for you as teachers to think about what that looks like. You know, if I'm teaching prenatal, I'm going to bond them to their babies. I'm going to bond the mommies together. I'm going to bond the partners together. I'm going to bond the experiences that the partners have that the mommies don't and the mommies have that the partners don't. And I'm going to spend some time on that because I want everybody to feel like they're all in this together. This is why you love retreats, because you get that deep bonding connection that sometimes in workshops we don't always get naturally, or even in like series and courses and trainings, unless it's really facilitated or the longevity of it naturally results in the bonding. So if you want to teach a really powerful workshop, you're going to invest in including a bonding opportunity for yourself, to them, and them to each other. Number four, make it interactive, which goes back to that learning style, right? Make it interactive with each other. Now, there are situations where it doesn't need to be like get up and go hug your fellow yogi that's over there on the third mat to the left. It doesn't have to be that. It could be interactive with everybody, like tonight, you sharing your experience. You feel like you're not alone. You feel like, wow, I've had that experience too, or wow, that sounds really interesting. So some sort of interaction if you can. Number five, you want to make sure, and this is after you've taught your workshop, obviously, you remind them of what they've learned. This is really important because not everybody remembers 2 hours ago. So you want to summarize what they learned, or you want to summarize what you want them to take away. So maybe they learned something totally different. They learned something about their current marriage. Well, you can't control that, but you can have them take away an idea of what you hope they learned, which might be partnership and connection, right? And then number six, have them commit to one actionable step or response. So like tonight, I gave you homework. Have them commit to something that obviously has to do with your workshop. So if you're teaching meditation, you're going to have them commit to some sort of meditative practice for 5 minutes. Maybe it's once, maybe you facilitate some follow-up. For those of you who recently did our Reiki, I did a 21-day Reiki follow-up, right? There's like, give them something to commit to. And so just to recap that, number one, introduce yourself and your expertise and passion about the event, the topic, and so on. Number two, make sure your students feel grounded. Number three, bonded to yourself and each other if possible. Number four, give them an interactive learning experience, which should include the 4 styles of learning. Number five, remind them of what they've learned after they've learned something. And number six, get them to commit to one actionable step or response. Now, what does that mean when I say or response? Response could be email me how you feel tomorrow after you just did yoga nidra tonight. Call me, email me, do a review. Those are responses. And obviously, an actionable step might be do the meditation. So it's just getting them to think about this particular time that they experienced again later. So it's like going on a date. Don't forget about me. Don't forget about this restaurant. Don't forget about this awesome time you had, right? So what can I do to help you remember that? Maybe we are never going to see each other again, but I want you to take something and live with that after. What does that look like? Now, obviously, your workshops, as Deb had, can include crystals and essential oils, and you can give them gifts, and maybe they paid for these gifts and whatever. These are all things that help them to feel that experience later. But if we're just talking about building a workshop with just some basic tips, and the other stuff you create and build and make it as big and grandiose as you like, awesome. But if you have this big grandiose event and you forget to introduce yourself or to ground them or to bond them or what have you, then are you really doing the thing you were hoping to do? I don't know. right? Now, the final two things I would add in is getting us back to business, which is, what is your follow-up plan? Are you going to even follow up at all? Are you going to email them, call them, invite them to something else? Right? I love that. Raquel says, since we're sharing ourselves here too, she just dropped her Instagram and Gmail. Yes, that is my biggest goal in the future, is that there's a lot more interaction and bonding, because I truly believe you're the creme de la creme of humans. And so far, we don't have any male persuasions in our little sorority over here. They're invited. And we're fine with that, but it does feel very much like a sisterhood thus far. So what's your follow-up plan if you have one? You don't have to have one. It's just a question for you to consider if you did. Now, a follow-up plan could just be, hey guys, I'm teaching another workshop in 3 months. I'm teaching a retreat in 1 year. Want to follow up on how today felt for you, anything or nothing. The thing you don't want to do is not have thought about it, because there's nothing worse than having an amazing workshop and then later you're like, oh, wow, I wish I would have gotten all their emails, or I wish I'd have done something another way, or I wish I would have followed up, or I wish I would have just told them, hi, I'm thinking about you. I've done these things where I thought about it later and I'm like, oh, that would have been really cool to stay in contact with that amazing group. And it's always awkward if you show up like 3 months later, like, hey, you took this workshop and I miss you guys. Even if you're giving something for free, people move on with their lives. And then ask yourself if you are going to ask them for feedback. Now, if you learned tonight, Deb has a lot of feedback. So obviously you've created an environment either where you don't have to be directly asking for it, but you are open to receiving it and they can sense that. I know we've all experienced people who give you that energy of like, let me know how I'm doing, and people who are like, I don't want to know, and everyone in between. And there's no wrong and there's no right. I want to point that out. I know you've been to a restaurant where there's some immediate, like maybe the manager comes up and says, how was your meal tonight? And you're like, oh, it was amazing, or whatever, versus maybe never being asked. And maybe you didn't notice if you were asked or didn't ask, but you probably noticed when it was a surprised event for you, right? So what do you want that to look like for your student? Do you want to create an open environment where feedback is welcome? Do you want to request feedback anonymously or directly? Or do you want an environment where maybe you want it to kind of end where it's at and you don't want any feedback? And let me tell you why that's also okay. Maybe you're teaching in an environment or you're guiding in an environment where you do not want it to be at all about you. You want them to walk away with their own thoughts, their own experience, no matter what it was. You were just there like the floor, right? If they give you feedback, awesome, but you're not looking for it. Now, with that said, and let me point out a good example of that. A good example would be, and I know I keep using prenatal, I don't know why. It's such an easy way to think about a workshop. It's like, oh yeah, prenatal or not. It's pretty black and white in that way. But I may not care about the feedback if the prenatal workshop experience was for them to have like an introspective bonding to their baby. But I may absolutely care about the feedback if the prenatal was more about embodiment or movement of some sort, or maybe trying to control the breath in some way. Maybe I need to know, did that work for you or not? Because I don't want to keep teaching it, or I want to teach it in a new and different way if whatever my thought was I was wanting to have happen physically for you isn't. So sometimes things are very subjective and we are okay with that. That's your experience. I'm just facilitating it. And sometimes we need to know, if I have you raise your arm like this so that we can have some other expression in the body. And when I do that, it's not giving us the result that I'm trying to offer, but it's causing an adverse effect even. I need to know. Now, as many of you know, especially if you do private sessions, feedback can look a lot of ways. It can be throughout the process. How are you guys all doing right now? Everybody understand what I just said? Does everyone feel okay with what I just asked you to do? That's on the spot feedback built in as you go. Then there's, of course, the feedback that you maybe get as a conclusion. Okay. So kind of think about what that looks like for you. Maybe even just notice what you naturally do. And there's no wrong answer. There's no wrong answer on that one at all. Okay, our final piece to conclude tonight's session. And thank you for your patience and thank you for your participation. I really love when I have a lot of participation. And just like trying to facilitate a workshop, you're going to have your students who have a lot that they want to share with you. And you're going to have times that you're teaching that exact topic, and students are not very open on that day. Like tonight's a full moon, so maybe we're feeling a little jazzy. But you still have to be able to get the content in there, at least the main points, as Marilyn pointed out earlier. Maybe I think I'm getting all of it in tonight, but at the same time, if I needed to leave something out, I made sure I was really mindful about what that would look like. So be prepared, because what I was being mindful of tonight was making sure you all felt heard and participated, and I encourage that, while also making sure that you weren't like, what did I just learn, or did I learn anything tonight, right? So it's a gentle balance, but I appreciate your souls. Okay, finally, in our last moments together, this is going to be an introspective practice for you all to consider as you continue on your journey of creating fabulous workshops. Thinking about what your ideal topic would be, and if you've already taught, what your upcoming one may be, or how you wish to expand. What would be an ideal duration for you? We all have limits. We all have limits, you know? I've learned that 1 hour for a workshop for me is not enough. 1.5 hours is a nice, pretty little sweet spot for most topics. 2 hours, I feel like it gives me everything I could possibly need to offer, plus some feedback and some bonding and some discussion. Anything over 2 hours is really teetering for me into another realm, like training, courses, so on. But know yourself. Some of you can get things across in a very short amount of time, very concisely. I feel like Raquel would be that type of teacher. And some of us need a lot more time because we're very much into story, we're very much into conversational learning. And so just know what that looks like for you based on that topic and in general. And you'll learn some of this by doing it too. You might realize, wow, I didn't realize I could talk for 5 hours, which is something I learned through teaching yoga teacher trainings. Why would someone come to your workshop? Why would someone come to your workshop? Why do you go to workshops, which we discussed? And can you make that parallel? And are you able to teach what the topic you want in a workshop in just a normal class that's workshop styled? And that's a challenge, right? Going back to headstands, I feel more comfortable teaching headstands in a very curated environment, right? Like a workshop versus trying to teach a headstand in a group level class. I can do it, but it does take away from something in that class, someone else or some situation. I prefer someone to already know what they're doing and I can just keep an eye on them and give them a quick little tip, maybe bring their elbows in a little closer versus someone who's never done it. But on the flip side, I've been to workshops that could have been taught in a general asana class, right? Meaning, or just a general class, in general, meaning they are really elaborating on some type of expansive theme that at the end of the day just felt like a feel-good class with a lot of extra fluff. I'm not saying anything's wrong with that, especially if you incorporate things that I don't know, like maybe I'm doing self body massage, maybe I'm doing some stuff that I can't do in a regular class. But if it just feels like a really long yoga class, then that's what it is. Probably not necessarily a workshop. So that's why we got to go back to those three components and all four learning styles to create that balance and keeping that business topic filled in with our promise so that it doesn't just feel like a 2 hour asana class. Lori, who used to teach teacher trainings, one of my favorite OG yogis, she teaches yin yoga as a class and she teaches yin yoga as a workshop. And when she teaches yin yoga as a class, it's exactly how it sounds. And when she teaches it as a workshop, she pulls up resources, she teaches about the why, she gets you to understand the meaning of the pose. She takes the class and elaborates on that class in ways that you wouldn't normally see in a typical yin class, but now she's workshopping that typical class in a bigger way. If you normally teach restorative with all of the props, but you want to teach a restorative workshop, maybe describe what we're doing with the props. Why do they matter? Why these props? Why restorative? The history of it. Where did it come from? The lineage. What are you expecting to receive out of it? What homework or takeaways or actionables can I get when I leave here? Or is it just a really wonderful full moon hour and a half restorative class where I don't have to think, learn, or anything? Which leads me to this final point. When you think about a yoga class, you all mentioned it already. Your expectation is typically to be present. When you think about a workshop, you all said it already. Your expectation is to elevate, expand, learn, think, embrace skills, new and old. When I'm learning something new, I typically walk away invigorated and exhausted. And when I'm not learning something and I can be present in the moment and hear the birds chirping without identifying the type of bird that is chirping, then I can just listen to the bird chirp. So when you ask yourself, are you teaching a class, a workshop styled class, a workshop, a series of workshops that group together or expand upon each other, a course, a training, and you keep going, ask yourself, will my student need to think hard? Will my student need to think about this? Will they need to think hard? Now, I will create a little caveat for all of you. For those of you who teach yoga for beginners, yoga for beginners is such a dichotomy because it is a workshop style class in most cases when taught well, meaning you are explaining a lot of what you're doing, teaching what the poses are, these words mean, all of that, and trying to get your students to be present. But if this is new to them, they are both relaxed and exhausted in equal measure a lot of the times as they learn something they've never heard of before, as they explore something in their body they've never explored before. So usually those of you who teach yoga for beginners and you really teach it from an instructional perspective, like a true beginner perspective, you are equally tired as well, right? Because you are thinking about how to articulate your thoughts and you're trying to incorporate, did they get it? Are they all in down dog? Do I need to explain that differently? And they're thinking the same thing. Am I doing this? So it is a learning experience. And I would have to say, teaching yoga for beginners is the closest to teaching a workshop. Teaching private yoga can feel like that, but it's probably more bonding and connective and probably more therapeutic, where your student gets to feel themselves without the pressures of the world around them, including other students. And they can lean into some learning expectation, but mostly you being completely in control of that facilitation. That is not how it feels when you're in a workshop environment typically. right? Now, there are caveats and nuances to all of this, but if you ask yourself, is my student going to be tired when they leave here from thinking, or am I going to require them to think a lot? That might be a good way to consider that you're teaching more workshop styled. Okay. So, with that all said, hopefully we all feel comfortable exploring teaching workshops. And in the actual 300-hour course, you have a workshop you're supposed to create as one of your submissions. Of course, there's lots of different ways to do that, but it is really fun. And especially if you can put one together, if you haven't already, and challenge yourself to teach it to some of these guidelines so that it's very formalized and you have maybe just a nice operating way of going about it versus just going with the flow of it. So you can really see the challenge that you might be having or how maybe easy and simple it is for you. So Julie says, great timing on the subject, Bree. Well, I suppose you must be planning to teach a pretty cool workshop. All right, my dears, that's going to conclude this session. Yay! We're going to be talking about teaching private one-on-one, teaching private two-on-one or small group, why that looks different from workshop and some of our upcoming Zooms. So stay tuned for those topics to come up. And again, thank you for all participating so much and being here. I appreciate you all. And if you're watching this in real time, we will be in session this Saturday. Thank you to our alumni, Marilyn, for spending 2 hours of her post-grad time visiting us. We really do appreciate you. You inspire us. Thank you so much, everyone. Shanti Om. May we all go in peace. Oh, Marilyn is somewhere else. She is somewhere on the East Coast. Thank you for being here. Thanks for staying up so late with us. And love
Been
you
up
all.
since 4 a.m.
Oh my goodness, you're almost up 24 hours. Okay.
Grandchildren will do it to you every time.
Yeah. Well, you're getting a lot of pleasure out of that too.
Yes.
You can sleep later.
Next year.
Next year.
Thanks, Bree.
Happy holidays. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Amber, Raquel, Julie, Jen, Deb, Allison, Marilyn, and whoever left a little bit early and watches this later. Good night. Happy holidays. Bye.